Hello there. Is there a solution to yo-yo dieting? I think there is, and by the end of this video, you will know how to do it. There's basically three fundamental changes you need to make. If you implement those well, I think there's every chance that the weight you lose, you'll be able to keep off forever. And there are, like I say, there are three fundamental reasons for that. So if you're a bit skeptical at the moment, that is absolutely fine, because you've probably been through loads and loads of diets, 20, 30 diets, and the end result has always been the same thing. You put the weight back on. So we're going to investigate that. You're going to learn how to change what you're doing going forward, so that the chances of holding on to those losses is far, far higher. Okay, so let's go and see where we get. So the toll of yo-yo dieting can be really hard on people, both physically and psychologically. If you think that 95% of people who go on diets fail ultimately, then that's the majority. And you'd think, when we look at how we're losing weight, that we'd be thinking, well, if I do this again, I'm just doing the same thing over and over again. But we still do it. Why is that? You can get very frustrated, and I understand that. A lot of my clients who come to me, they've spent years and years, decades of their life in some cases, actually just going around in this circle, and they feel out of control. It erodes your self-confidence, and you just feel you can't sort of trust yourself to apply yourself in this area of your life. In fact, most of the people I work with are really together people, and they've got great families, they've got great jobs, or they run businesses, and they can't figure out why their weight just seems to be the thing that's out of control. Yet all these other things, they've got all their ducks in a row, and they can't figure out what's going on. So it takes a toll physically as well. You might be aware of this, that every time you go through that cycle of losing weight and putting it back on again, this can negatively affect your metabolism, so that the next time you do a diet, it gets even harder, and progressive diets get harder to lose weight, and you very quickly put it on when you come off the diet. What you might not be aware of is, if you go on a diet and you get down to maybe your goal weight, and you're really chuffed with that, the next time you go through that cycle and reach the same weight, it may mean that although you're the same weight, you're just a little bit fatter than you were the last time, even though you weigh the same. And that's because during calorie restricted dieting, what tends to happen is you also lose muscle mass. And that's not a good thing, because metabolically, muscle mass is good for you. It's good for you, obviously, from a functional point of view. And as we age, we really want to try and hang on to as much muscle as possible, because that's going to help keep us active. So there are issues related to calorie restriction, and we need to address all these things. People say to me, I've tried every single diet there's ever been, anything that comes out, I always try it, and it's always the same result. So it must be me. It's me that's the problem. I'm too weak. I haven't got enough self-discipline. They say things like that. But when you look closely at all the diets, they're all pretty much the same. And I don't care whether it's bowls of cabbage soup, or powders with 500 calorie shake type things, or counting points. When you look at them, they all boil down to this calorie restriction approach to dieting. So the mantra is calories in, calories out, but we know it's got all these problems and it doesn't seem to work. So why do it? Well, we're told it's the only way to lose weight. You've got to focus on having a calorie deficit every day, and that's how you lose fat. There's 3,500 calories in a pound of fat. How many have you heard that one before? And all these things that make you believe that this is the only way. A classic one is people say to me, "Oh, went to see my doctor," who isn't exactly svelte themselves, and they brought up the subject of my weight. They said, "Mrs. Smith, you really ought to lose a few pounds," and you get the lecture. It's just simply a question of eating less and moving more, said in a very patronizing way. Don't know whether you've had that experience, but it is quite frustrating. Like you're not really trying, yeah? But actually, it's not your fault. It's the method. And we're going to go extensively into the method, the mindset, and how to keep yourself motivated to implement this and make it work for you. So calorie restriction comes with other unhelpful baggage as well, especially as it relates to fat. So if you're counting calories, you're really clued up to the idea that low fat is best because there's less calories in fat compared to carbs and protein. Yeah. And there's lots of foods that you can buy off the shelf. They're all low fat to help aid you in your dieting. Also, fat's bad for you, isn't it? I mean, fat clogs your heart up, gives people heart attacks. So really, if you can keep your fat down, then you're going to be healthy and you're going to be thin as well because of those less calories. How's that working out for you? Well, it isn't. The idea of a balanced diet, you hear it all the time. Whole grains, balanced diet. Well, what they really mean is the food guidelines, which are like the food pyramid. And the base of that pyramid is whole grains and basically high carb diets, whether you're on a diet or not. High carbs in proportion to protein and especially fat. You want your fat as low as possible. Well, I'm going to bust some myths there. And basically the research over the last 10 years suggests all this stuff about fat being bad for you and affecting your heart isn't really correct. And there's a lot of evidence for that. I know there are people out there who will refute that and they'll still say that cholesterol is bad for you and it clogs up your heart and that's what's in your arteries, so it must be true. But these things are steadily changing, and a lot of the recent research throws all that stuff out the window. The problem does look like it's processed carbs, and also to some degree, excuse me, it's vegetable oils. And when you look at food that you buy, invariably it's got processed carbs or starches or sugar in there combined with vegetable oils. If you could just avoid those two things, you go a long way to helping yourself. But of course, if you're stuck in calories in, calories out, and a healthy, balanced diet, you're not going to be able to do that. So you need a bit of a shift mentally. Maybe do some research to for yourself so that you feel confident that what I'm saying is something that you can prove to yourself is correct. Okay, so let's have a look at calorie restriction as a methodology and why it doesn't really work. So the way I like to look at it is it's a bit like those if you ever go to the fair or and even have them at kids' parties now, are these inflatable runways. So you get your kids and they put this harness on and they attach a big thick bungee cord to one end of this runway, and the kids have to run down this sort of inflatable runway. It's a bit wobbly, it's a bit slippery, but they run down to the other end, and the idea is they pick up a beanbag at the end and bring it back. But on the way down this runway, it starts to get harder because you got more and more tension on the bungee cord. And they're sort of 3/4 of the way down there. They were doing quite well, but suddenly it gets harder and harder and harder, and they're trying to reach for this beanbag, but it's the strain is too great. They're on wobbly ground anyway. They slip over, they fall over, and they slide all the way back to the start. Well, to me, that's calorie restriction dieting. Calories in, calories out. Because the further out you go, you don't find it easier. You actually find it harder and harder and harder. So if you've ever been on a diet, your first week you might lose 7 pounds. A lot of people do on their first week, and you're thinking, "Oh, I don't even feel hungry." So you tell your friends. They say, "Oh, you look great. Yeah, I lost 7 pounds." And you know what? I don't even feel hungry. And they go, "Whoa, that's fantastic. I want some of that." What is it? Is it a book or is it a program or whatever? Now, that is very motivational, and that is one of the traps of calorie controlled diets, because in the beginning it's highly motivational. So you get great results at the start, and it's relatively easy because that first week you're probably not feeling that hungry. Second week, didn't lose 7 pounds, but you did lose some weight, and you can manage it. It's not too bad. It's not too bad at all. Week 3, week 4, week 5, and then you start to get into this. You're having to concentrate really, really hard to stay on your diet. You're absolutely starving. You can't think of anything else but your next meal, and you've got a job, you've got kids to look after, you've got a home, you financial stuff to figure out. You've got life, and life will eventually intervene and give you a little prod when all this is going on, and it'll be just too much. And what happens? Bang, out goes the diet, and up goes the weight. So it starts off easy, but it gets harder and harder and harder as you go on, just like going down one of these bungee runs. So we know it's not sustainable. It doesn't add up because of this constant hunger. And you've also got this physical side, the metabolic downgrading. So as your weight comes down, so is your metabolism. So really we want something that isn't going to affect negatively your metabolism. Because obviously when you do come off your diet, your metabolism is going to be down on the floor, and your caloric intake is way up here again. And that's a big gap now, and that's why you put the fat on really, really quickly when you come off it. There are unhelpful beliefs about calorie restriction that don't help you actually to sustain your weight, but probably the main thing that I don't like about calorie restriction is you're not building habits that are going to be useful in the future. As soon as you come off your diet, you revert back to your old behavior. What you want is something that's going to maintain your everything that you've built up, all the habits, all the good behaviors. If you want something that's going to be sustainable and you can keep doing those things, no problem at all. And then over time, that becomes your new normal sort of thing, and it gets easier rather than harder. So it's not sustainable, and that's why you yo-yo dieting. So we want to change 3 fundamental things. The method, that's the levers that you are pulling to burn the fat on your body. We need to change the mindset, because unless we unlearn some of the things that we were doing when we were doing normal dieting, this isn't going to work. What I'm going to suggest to you, the method I'm going to suggest to you, won't work, because you've still got things like calories in, calories out in your mind. You're focusing on calories. You don't like the idea of having more fat. You're fat phobic. So you need to rejig your mind in that way. And then thirdly, what we want to do is to have consistent motivation going forward. And that's the key, because I believe everybody's highly motivated to lose weight if they're overweight. It's just how you implement that, and whether you can do it consistently over time, so that you reach a point, you want to reach a point where you say to yourself, do you know what? I could do this forever. Now ask yourself, could you say that about being on a normal diet? I don't think so. Not maybe in the first week you could, but not after a month or 6 weeks or something like that. So you've got your inflatable runway model of weight loss. I'm going to give you a better one, but also give you an idea of why it might not be quite as motivating in the beginning, and it's a bit harder in the beginning. And human nature is such that we like things to be easy, not hard. And we don't want to get the results further down the line. We want to get them very quickly, and that's part of the problem. And I don't want to put you off with that. But let me just explain this idea. So you think of a rocket on a launch pad. As they light the touch paper on the rocket, you get all this thrust coming out the bottom. And when you look at the rocket, it doesn't appear to be moving, but it is. Now, it might not be moving very quickly, but it's definitely moving. And as it gathers momentum, it begins to speed up and get faster and faster and faster. And it clears the tower and it goes up into the sky. And at some point, it will escape the Earth's gravitational field. So initially, the amount of energy that was required was a lot, but it didn't seem to be doing very much. But all that energy that was started to be stored up in momentum eventually created a situation where that rocket not only was weightless, but you could turn off the thrust and it would just keep going. So that's the method I want you to use. Yes, you're going to be on that launch pad for a bit. Yes, you'll be thinking, oh, it doesn't look like anything's happening, and I'm putting in a lot of effort here. Where are my results? But if you get over that and you think of this analogy, boy, are you going to be pleased that you made that little investment in the beginning, because it'll keep paying going forward, and it'll be the end of yo-yo dieting for you. So that's the trade-off, and it's why companies that are in the diet industry, in the food industry, if you just did a calorie restricted diet, eating their plans or foods or whatever, and you only had to do it once and you kept it off, I don't think a lot of them would be in business. They rely on the fact that you're going to put the weight on again, and then you're going to go on another diet and just keep repeating this cycle. But you've got to accept, if you want to break out of that, you're going to have to trade off those quick hits, for something more of a long-term benefit to you. It is a little bit demotivating at first. Change is uncomfortable. We all know that whenever we're struggling with something new, it don't feel right. It don't feel good because it's outside of our comfort zone. But we also know that anything worthwhile in our life, any accomplishment that we've achieved, it's probably got a bit of that to it, hasn't it? Where you've just had to step out just a little bit, and then you become familiar with it, and you think, oh, well, that wasn't too bad. So the main benefit from this is that it's going to get easier and easier and easier going forward, and you can be free and escape that trap of yo-yo dieting. Okay, so what is this method you're on about? Well, I like to call it the insulin diet or low insulin diet. The idea is that a lot of the reasons that we store fat on our body is because we have poor regulation of the hormone insulin in our bodies. And that's primarily due to what we eat and how often we eat. So another thing that comes along with calorie restriction is frequent feeding, isn't it? Graze, have 6 meals a day. Don't have one big meal because that'll all go to your tummy if you do. Spread it out through the day. That's absolute nonsense. If you hear someone saying that, it's nonsense. It's not true. What do you think thousands and thousands of years ago we were really grazing as a species? It wasn't until we started farming and harvesting and stopped being hunter-gatherers. Do you really think we were having 6 meals a day? So it doesn't fit in with our ancestry. And part of the reason we feel like we have to do it, not just because we're told to do it, but because we're so carb dependent. So one of the things we want to start doing is focus on our macronutrients, not calories. If we focus on, say, raising our fat a little bit, not necessarily massively, but just a bit, and reducing our carbohydrate load, bearing in mind that might be 60% of what we're eating, even on a diet, 60% of our ratios of protein, carbs, and fat. If you start to do that, raise fat, lower carbs, you're going to be in a much better position. And if you can get your carbs down, I don't recommend you do this in a day, but gradually bring your carbs down to say 50 grams, something like that, maybe a bit lower. What will actually happen is that you really start to burn the fat on your body as a primary fuel because your insulin is really low. So if you look at that graph there, say that's your that's a 24-hour period time along the bottom, and up the side is the amount of insulin in your system. So if someone's eating 3 meals a day, you'll get like 3 humps there, as you can see, because if you're eating carbs and protein, you are going to raise your insulin, and that's normal and natural. If you're eating 6 meals a day like that, even snacks that are carbs and protein, you're going to get spikes then. So you could have 6 spikes in a day, which is just ridiculous, and it's part of the reason you put on weight, and even on a diet you find it hard to maintain a loss. So what can we do? We want to lower the total area underneath that graph. So we can do a number of things. We can bring down the total amount of insulin, and we can do that again, like I say, by bringing down the carbs. So you want to go from, say, on a normal diet, someone might be on 200 grams a day. On a, not dieting, just normally, and on a diet they might be 100 or something like that, but the ratio is still high. it's 60% or something like that. We want to bring that right down, maybe even 10%, something along those lines, which seems a lot, but it's perfectly doable. Lots of people are starting to do this now, and they don't feel hungry, and they don't feel hungry because they're burning the fat on their body. So what we can do is, say you're on 3 meals a day at the moment, cut out snacks, so you'll have your 3 little spikes there. But what you'll find with this is, in no time at all, you just won't feel hungry, especially in the morning. You just don't crave carbs, you just don't fancy anything. That's because you're burning the fat on your body, which is really good. So if that's the case, then why have a breakfast? So a lot of people, what they'll do is they'll just cut out breakfast and eat later on in the morning, or maybe even at lunchtime. And then you'd have 2 little insulin spikes. But don't forget, we're trying to bring the whole thing down. And the more fat you eat and the less carbs, the lower the total amount of area underneath that graph. We want to bring down insulin. Now, that's not to say we don't want a couple of spikes today. It's part of the normal rhythms, and part of it's a normal thing with the food we eat, but we want to minimize it, and we want to bring the peaks down a bit. Okay, so the diet is also moderate protein. Now, I think when you first start this, it's a good idea to keep your protein lowish, but enough. Because remember I said about losing muscle mass, you want to keep your protein up enough so you don't lose any muscle mass. And certainly as you go on with this, you might want to bump up your protein just a bit. So it's a moderate protein diet. You want to be eating wholesome food. And what I mean by that is food that really is in its original state. If you're buying ready meals, even diet ready meals, if you look at the ingredients, there's probably 20, 30 ingredients. And I bet you, if you look on that packet, you'll have things like rapeseed oil, different starches. If it's a ready meal, it might be rice, potatoes, stuff like this. What we want to do is try and get away from those stodgy, what years ago you used to call stodgy food. They had it right years ago. And if you go back to the 60s and the 70s and look at pictures, there weren't very many fat people. They had the right idea about stodgy food. Loads and loads of potatoes, loads and loads of bread. Yeah, you want to bring that right down. And if you can do that, you'll be in a much better position. So if you can, at some stage, skip breakfast, because that will really help bring stuff down. But in the beginning, you don't really want to be doing that. You're aiming for about 50 grams of carbohydrate per day, and try and make it from healthy food like vegetables, but not starchy vegetables. So in case you're wondering what this diet would look like, here's just an example of the sort of thing. So wild caught salmon, really excellent. I had that at least twice a week. It's a stock picture. If I was to give you a better representation of that, I would have more veg, more salad, more greens. So people think, oh, this diet won't work for me because I like my greens. Yes, but they've got to be low starch greens. Olive oil, fantastic. Have as much olive oil as you want. You don't have to, how can I put it? You're not trying to restrict. See, it comes back to this calorie mentality. Oh, all that olive oil, there's so many calories in it. Don't worry about it. Your appetite will soon tell you when you've had enough. And bearing in mind, your appetite is also taking into account the energy balance from the fat that you're burning on your body. So classic other ones are, just any animal products, really, meat, eggs, as well as fish. And you've got to get over this idea that fat is bad, especially saturated fat. The red meat thing, if you look at the studies, there, it's not convincing to me, not at all. And what I'm interested in is getting people as healthy as possible, and getting them to a lean body weight, or a relatively lean body weight. That's going to help them far more. Same with eggs. I mean, eggs are great. The nutrition in eggs is fantastic. Forget all the stuff about cholesterol. If you're not sure, go and do your own research. But the cholesterol myth sort of been put to bed, but it persists. And you hear it from certain quarters. You certainly hear it where there are agendas about animal products, and whether we should or shouldn't be eating animal products because of welfare or because of the environment or whatever. But you got to make your own judgment. And what I'm hoping is that you don't take my word for it, but you go off and you do a bit of due diligence on it, and then you sort of realize, okay, I'm happy with that. Let's get on with this. Can you do it without eating animal products? You certainly can, but it's a lot harder. So I would say, look, just eat animal products, lots of green leafy veg, lots of olive oil, eggs, fish. Can't go wrong. Really can't go wrong. You're not counting calories. You're going off your appetite. And I promise you, if you're eating real food like this, it will be very difficult to overeat. It'll be very difficult to be in a calorie surplus. Okay, so on to part 2 of this. Say you start doing that low insulin diet, and in your mind you're still thinking the same way as doing calorie restriction, calorie control, crash diet. It won't work for you. And I know it won't work for you because I meet lots of people. I talk about a low insulin diet, and they say, oh yeah, I tried that and it didn't work for me. And when you delve into the reason why it didn't work for them, it's because they've still got a calories in, calories out mindset. So let's just go through a few of those things so we can change your mindset if you go and do this. The main thing is long-term perspective. You want to see this as a not a tactic, not a short, sharp shock thing, but something you do for the rest of your life that you feel you can do forever. And that puts a very different frame on it, especially if, like I say in the beginning, you're going to have to struggle a little bit to come to terms with it. But if you're thinking long term, like the rest of your days, it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. So bear that in mind. That's the trouble with diets. They're short-term tactics. You can't do them forever. They're not sustainable. But this is, and you can do this forever. Get to the weight you want to be and never put the weight back on again. So when I say not much happens in the beginning on this diet, and that's a struggle for people mentally, what you can imagine is that you're actually healing on the inside, and that is perfectly true. As soon as you start going on this diet, metabolically you're starting to get into better shape. So things like if you have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, you might not even know if you've got it, but it's where your liver gets all fatty. If you go on this diet, it will help you to use the fat that's in the liver, and the liver will start to function better. Its metabolic processes will improve, and that means for you that you're going to have an easier time going forward losing weight. So I knew someone once who owned a vineyard in France, and he made some of the best grapes in the region, really. And I asked him, I said, what's your secret to making the best wine? Probably, with maybe not in the world, but in the country. And he said, well, really, it's not down to me. It's down to the soil. And he explained to me that to get the best wine, it's the only thing you have to really concern yourself about is the soil. If you get that right, everything else is pretty straightforward. If you've got rubbish soil, it doesn't matter what you do, you're never going to have great grapes, and you're never going to have good wine. So when you're doing this, think about what you're building as a set of behaviors and routines, how you're thinking in your mind about this, thinking long term. And by focusing on that, you will get the results out the other end. It'll become inevitable to get those results if you've got everything sorted. Focus on the roots, focus on the soil. Don't focus on the scales and I haven't lost a pound in 3 days. Just focus on this, and that will come, and it will come easier the longer you do it. Okay. The other thing mentally you've got to understand is, just like a skill, you will have plateaus along the way, and they are perfectly natural. So I meet a lot of people and they say, I've been stuck at X for so long, and it might be a fortnight or something. What do I need to do next? What's the next level? How can I really knuckle down and do this harder? And do you know what? Sometimes that is required. Maybe they want to lower their carbs a little bit more, or maybe they want to have a smaller feeding window in a day. If it's 12 hours, bring it down to 10 or 8. That's something that you can do, and just have 2 meals a day. But sometimes it's just a natural plateau. And again, if you're thinking long term, if you go a week or two and you haven't lost any weight, but you're doing everything right, you can relax and just say, okay, well, that's fine. It's just a natural plateau. Just like mastery of anything, you get a plateau, and that's just the way the mind and the body works. And then sometimes it'll be for a while, and then bang, you're a skill that you were learning, suddenly you've just got it just like that, and you've been struggling for maybe a few weeks with it, and then bang, it just clicks. Well, it's the same with your weight. Accept the fact you're going to have plateaus. Obviously, if they go for more than a week or two, maybe look at what you're doing. Maybe just make sure that you're still doing what you were doing when you first started off, and that led to results. But just accept that you're going to have some plateaus. Again, it's this instant gratification, quick fix mentality that you've been trained in. Okay, we're human and we all want that, but it does come with the calories in, calories out mentality. So try and get that in your mind. And I think along with those two analogies, the runway and the spaceship taking off, that will, when things are a little bit difficult, especially in the beginning, that'll see you through. I'm sure it will. Which brings me on to motivation and weight loss. And I guess as a clinical hypnotherapist and a coach, people think, it's all about motivation, and that's where I really earn my money, really keeping people on the straight and narrow. But you know what? I've never had a client yet who wasn't highly motivated to lose weight. Highly motivated. They were just frustrated that they weren't getting results. They were highly motivated until they stopped losing weight or started putting it on, or their life got out of control, and then they lost motivation and they got very upset with themselves. They felt sorry for themselves, demotivated then, so it's more consistency and what you can do to stay motivated consistently. So one of the things I do with clients, or not even with clients, if I just do a breakthrough session with someone, I really do focus on getting clarity on why you're doing it. And most people say to me, well, because I want to weigh X, or I want to get into these genes. But I want to drill deeper and find out what's behind that. And this is a really good way to get very clear on what your goals are and why, and that will help you maintain motivation. So go beyond the, why do you want to fit into those skinny jeans? Why? What's the reasoning behind that? Maybe do a bit of journaling. That's always a good idea. And really get into getting clarity on your goal. How will you feel when you get there? So we do a lot of work in sessions, which is what I call the ecology of your goal. So imagine yourself in the future having achieved the result that you want. Now, from there, you're in a very good position to know how it feels, look back on what you did to get there, and how it affects other things in your life as well. And sometimes you might want to rejig that goal. Sometimes if you're not very motivated, it's because you either haven't got that clarity or it's not right for you, but you don't realize that yet. Okay, so that's a good thing to do. Get really clear. The other thing people say to me is, well, what you've got to understand, Mike, is I haven't got much willpower and I'm just weak-willed. And after 2 months of dieting, starving myself 24/7, eating lettuce, you know what? I just haven't got the willpower. Well, look, I'm not surprised. It's not that you're weak-willed. It's the method. The method going forward gets harder and harder, and you will snap. You will give up. You might reach the goal and go, hey, I've reached my goal. But what do you do then? You don't stay on your diet. You come off it because it's absolute torture. So don't be hard on yourself. Change the method and you'll find it easier over the long haul. The other thing I want to talk to you about is how the brain works and how sometimes it works against us. So have you ever said to yourself something like, it's like a part of me is trying to keep me fat or make me fat or hold me back. It's like a part of me, a force wanted me to eat that cake. And by God, however much I resisted, I ate the cake and it sabotaged my efforts. If you hear yourself saying that or you say that to someone, it's sort of true. You do have a bit like that inside you. And again, journaling is really good because although I use techniques with clients so that you can realign that part of you so that it works for you rather than against you. And that's one of the real forces, far more powerful than willpower. If you can harness that and get it as an ally rather than an enemy, the world's your oyster. And that's true globally in any area of your life, because it's that resistance, it's that self-sabotaging element that sort of means well for you, wants to keep you safe, but unfortunately it holds us back in many areas. And start writing, do a journal, and write about that part as if you were having a conversation with it. And magical things happen, maybe not the first time you do it, but over time you can get a lot of alignment in your mind. And that's sort of what you want. The lower bits of your brain and the prefrontal cortex, you want them all working together towards your goal, and then nothing's going to stop you if you can do that. What else is going to help with motivation apart from communication with your unconscious mind? I think it's really important to focus on getting the method down pat. I'm not a big advocate of exercise. Again, it's to do with calorie restriction. Why do you do exercise? To burn calories? No, forget calories. Now, if you're doing exercise, don't stop, for God's sake. If you enjoy it and it's something that you're happy doing, there are loads and loads of benefits of exercising. But if in your mind you're thinking, oh, I've got to burn the calories, it won't help. It will hinder, and it just takes away a little bit of your focus. Focus on the method and getting that right, and you'll lose far more weight than doing spinning classes or something like that. Another thing that will help is take baby steps. So this will probably be really overwhelming if it's the first time you've ever come across this concept of losing weight and all the other things associated with it. Just take one little step at the time, and each time you take a step, congratulate yourself, celebrate, because you're on this path. And like I say, it's a lifetime thing. It's not just a quick win. This is something that will pay back for the rest of your life. So just take little steps. So if you're looking at the method and you're thinking, well, how am I going to, I don't really want to give up bread. I don't want to give up, oh dear, do I have to do this? Do I have to do that? Well, just pick one thing that you can do. Just one thing. It might be swapping out cereal for breakfast. That would be an excellent one, actually. If you're having cereal for breakfast, that's just get rid of that. And even this, it's laughable that there are some out there that are supposedly to help you to lose weight. Get rid of all your cereal and start making your own granola, or what I like is full fat yogurt. If you have full fat Greek yogurt with no sugar in, nothing else in it, just that, put some berries on top, sprinkle a few nuts on top. That is the sort of food I'm talking about. And if you're thinking, oh, well, yeah, I could manage that, and swap that out for your, your juice and your cereal and your toast, you got it made, because that's probably a third of your meals sorted already. Now, obviously, you won't want to be having that every day. But like I say, eggs are fantastic. Omelets are fantastic for a breakfast. And at some point, you may decide, do you know what? Don't feel hungry in the morning. Don't want a breakfast at all. And then you're down to 2 meals a day. And for insulin, that's absolutely fantastic. Tap into this, the fat on your body, and you'll be going great guns. So one other thing, and I'm just trying to read my thing in front of my camera. Yeah, so what I want you to do now, as I finish off, is to think about what one thing you could do that you've learned here that would sort of, what I call, plant your flag in reality. So what a lot of people do is they watch things like this and they go, oh, right, yeah, I suppose, yeah. And they go away and they forget about it. And I don't want you to forget about it. I want you to stop yo-yo dieting. I want you to stop yo-yo dieting now. Commit to stop yo-yo dieting now. And the way you do that is take baby steps. But what's your first step? What's your first step? Of all the stuff, pick one thing that you create in reality from in here, from listening to me now. And I think if you do that, you're going to go great guns. Okay, so yeah, what's your first next step? Write it down, implement it as soon as possible. I hope you found this useful. Let me know in the comments if you've got any questions. If you're doing it and you get stuck, come back here, leave a comment, ask a question, or get in touch with me directly, and I'll do everything I can to help. Hopefully this channel will give you lots of inspiration on more specifics as we go forward. I do a lot of the psychological stuff, but I also talk about low carb, keto, and the low insulin diet. And I think if you can combine those three things, it's going to be a lot easier to succeed, so that you don't put the weight back on again. So best of luck with that, and let me know how you get on. Bye.